My name is Daniel, and this happened 3 years ago, a few days before Christmas. I still have trouble being in a room with Christmas lights on at night. Not because I hate Christmas, but because of what I saw reflected in them. That December, I was 26 years old and living alone in a small rental house on the edge of a quiet town in Pennsylvania. It wasn't remote, but it wasn't busy either. One of those neighborhoods where houses are close enough that you can see your neighbor's porch lights, but far enough that you don't hear much from them. Most people had already left town to spend the holidays with family. I couldn't afford to travel that year, and my job at a warehouse required me to work straight through Christmas Eve, so for the first time in my life, I was completely alone for the holidays. At first, I didn't mind it. I put up a small artificial Christmas tree in the living room, mostly so the house wouldn't feel so empty at night. I wrapped it with white lights instead of colored ones because the colored lights always felt a little too cheerful for how I was feeling that year. The first few nights were quiet, almost too quiet. By December 22nd, the silence had started getting to me. I'd leave the TV on even when I wasn't watching it, just to hear voices in the background. The house made normal noises, pipes clicking, the heater kicking on, but every sound felt louder when I was alone. That night, it was snowing lightly, not enough to cause problems, just enough to cover the ground in a thin, clean layer. I remember thinking how peaceful it looked through the front window. I went to bed around midnight. Sometime later, I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. At first, I couldn't tell what it was. I was still half asleep, staring at the ceiling, trying to decide if I had imagined it. Then I heard it again. A thump. It came from downstairs. I checked my phone. 2:17 a.m. I lay there listening, my heart slowly speeding up. Houses make noises at night, especially older ones. I told myself it was probably nothing, maybe snow sliding off the roof or something falling over. Then I heard it again. This time it was clearer. It sounded like something being set down. I got out of bed and stood at the top of the stairs, holding my breath. The living room was dark except for the glow of the Christmas tree lights. They cast faint reflections on the walls, blinking slowly. I didn't hear anything else. After a full minute, I convinced myself I was being paranoid and went back to bed. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, I went downstairs to make coffee, still feeling uneasy, but embarrassed with myself for getting worked up over nothing. That's when I saw it. There was a small cardboard box sitting under the Christmas tree. I stopped walking. I knew for a fact it hadn't been there before. The box wasn't wrapped, no tag, no name, just a plain brown box, about the size of a shoebox, sitting neatly beneath the tree like it belonged there. I stood in the kitchen doorway staring at it, my brain trying to come up with a logical explanation. Maybe I forgot I ordered something? Maybe a neighbor dropped off a package at the wrong house. But none of that explained how it got inside my living room. I checked the front door, still locked, no signs of damage. The back door too. All the windows were closed and locked. No footprints in the snow outside, at least none I could see from the windows. My hands were shaking when I finally picked up the box. It was heavier than I expected. I carried it to the kitchen table and just stared at it for a long time before opening it. Something about the situation felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Eventually, curiosity won. Inside the box was a folded red sweater. That was it. No note, no receipt, just the sweater. It looked old, like it had been worn and washed many times. When I lifted it out, something fell from inside and slid across the table. A photograph. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. It was my living room. Not just any living room, my living room. The couch, the TV, the Christmas tree, everything was exactly the same. The photo had been taken from the hallway, angled toward the tree, and in the reflection of the TV screen, I could see myself, sleeping on the couch. The photo was dated December 21st, 11:48 p.m. I didn't sit down for a long time after that. I called the police. They came, looked around, and told me there was no sign of forced entry. They suggested maybe it was some kind of prank or misunderstanding. They took the photo but didn't seem especially concerned. After they left, the house felt different. Exposed. That night, I didn't turn the Christmas tree lights on. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, careful, moving toward my bedroom. I froze in my bed when I heard the footsteps. They weren't loud, that's what made them worse. Whoever it was wasn't stumbling around or rushing. The steps were slow, deliberate, like the person knew exactly where they were going. My bedroom door was open just a crack. I always slept like that, mostly out of habit. The hallway light was off, but the faint glow from the street light outside filtered in through the windows, just enough to outline the doorway. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath and listened so hard my ears started ringing. Then I saw a shadow pass across the crack in the doorway. It didn't linger, it didn't peek in, it just moved past. I don't know how long I stayed frozen there staring at the doorway, waiting for something else to happen. Eventually, exhaustion took over. I must have fallen asleep sometime after sunrise because the next thing I remember was my alarm going off for work. I called in sick that day. There was no way I was leaving the house alone after what happened. I spent the entire morning checking every room, every closet, every corner. Nothing was out of place. No signs anyone had been there. Except the box. I decided to stay somewhere else that night. I packed a bag and planned to drive to my sister's place an hour away. Before leaving, I unplugged the Christmas tree lights and shoved the whole thing into the storage closet. I didn't want to look at it anymore. I left the sweater and the photo on the kitchen table. I didn't want them in my car. That night at my sister's house, I barely slept. Every creak made me sit up. Every shadow felt wrong. But nothing happened. On Christmas Eve morning, I got a call from my landlord. He asked if I'd been back at the house late the night before. I told him no and asked why. He said one of the neighbors had called him, complaining that someone had been walking around my house after midnight. They said they saw a man standing in the front window for a long time, just staring out into the street. The problem was the house was supposed to be empty. I drove back immediately, my stomach tight the whole way. The front door was locked when I arrived. Everything looked normal from the outside. No broken windows, no footprints. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, covering everything. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kitchen table was empty. The sweater and the photo were gone. I searched the entire house, hoping maybe I'd moved them and forgotten. I hadn't. They were gone. And the Christmas tree was back out in the living room, plugged in, lit. I stood there staring at it, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Under the tree was another box. This one was bigger. I didn't touch it. I backed out of the house and called the police again. This time they took it more seriously. They searched the place while I waited outside. They found no one, no signs of forced entry, again. One officer suggested maybe I was being targeted by someone I knew, an ex maybe. I didn't have one. Before they left, I asked one of them to open the box. Inside was a wrapped present, green paper, red ribbon. There was a tag on it, "To Daniel, from You Forgot This." Inside the wrapping was a small digital camera. The officer turned it on. There was only one video. It was time-stamped from the night before. The video showed my living room. The angle was low, like the camera had been set on the floor facing the couch. Then the video zoomed in, toward the hallway, toward the shadow standing just out of the light. After about 30 seconds, the shadow stepped forward. It was a man. He was wearing the red sweater from the box, and he was smiling directly at the camera. The video ended. I didn't stay in that house another night. I broke my lease and moved in with my sister temporarily. The landlord changed the locks and swore no one had a spare key besides him. A week later, he called me again. He said the new tenants refused to move in. They claimed someone kept leaving presents under the tree they put up in the living room, even though they hadn't finished unpacking yet.
I don't decorate for Christmas anymore, and I never keep gifts under a tree, because I still don't know how he got inside, and I don't know what I forgot.
My name is Aaron, and this happened on Christmas Eve 5 years ago. I don't go to church anymore, not because I don't believe in God, but because the last time I went, I realized how easy it is to disappear in a place full of people who assume they're safe. That Christmas, I was 19 and home from college for winter break. My parents live in a medium-sized town in the Midwest, the kind where Christmas is taken seriously. Decorations on every house, nativity scenes in front yards, churches on almost every corner. My mom insisted we attend the Christmas Eve service like we did every year. I didn't want to go. I was tired, irritated, and more interested in getting back to my room and playing video games. But she was persistent, and eventually I gave in just to keep the peace. The service started at 11 p.m. We arrived a little early. The parking lot was packed, which wasn't unusual. Christmas Eve services always brought in people who never went to church any other time of the year. Inside, the building was warm and bright. Soft music played, people whispered to each other and smiled politely. Everything felt calm. Too calm. We found seats about halfway up the center aisle. My dad went to use the restroom before things started, and my mom started flipping through the program. That's when I noticed something odd. Printed on the cover, it said, "Christmas Eve Candlelight Service, 9 p.m. I leaned over and pointed it out to my mom, joking that we were late. She frowned and checked her phone. "It's definitely the 11 o'clock service," she said. "Maybe they reused old programs." That explanation didn't sit right with me, but I let it go. The service began. The pastor walked out and greeted everyone. His voice echoed through the church as he welcomed us and talked about peace, family, and tradition. But about 10 minutes in, I realized something was off. He wasn't reading from a Bible. He wasn't reading from anything. He spoke slowly, deliberately, and never once looked down. I started paying closer attention. His words didn't quite make sense. They sounded close to scripture, but not exact, like someone paraphrasing something they didn't fully understand. I looked around. People were listening intently. No one else seemed to notice. Then the lights dimmed. Ushers began walking the aisles, handing out candles. When one reached me, I noticed his hands were shaking. I whispered to my mom that I didn't feel good and wanted to step outside for air. She gave me an annoyed look but nodded. I stood up and stepped into the aisle. That's when every head in the church turned toward me. Every single one. The room went completely silent. The pastor stopped speaking. He smiled and said my name. "Aaron," he said calmly. "Please sit back down." I had never met this man before. I didn't sit. I ran. The sound of my shoes slapping against the church floor echoed way louder than it should have. I sprinted toward the back doors, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was going to tear out of my chest. I heard chairs scraping behind me, but no one shouted. No one chased me. That silence was worse than yelling. When I reached the doors, I shoved one open. It didn't move. I grabbed the handle with both hands and pulled again. Locked. I tried the second door. Locked. I turned around slowly. The entire congregation was standing now. Hundreds of people, all facing me. Their candles were lit, small flames flickering in the dim light. Their faces were calm, smiling, patient, like they were waiting for me to understand something. The pastor stepped down from the stage. "Please," he said gently, "you're interrupting the service." I backed away until I felt the doors against my back. "I just want to leave," I said, cracking. "You already arrived," he replied. "That's the important part." I scanned the room, desperately looking for my parents. They were still seated. My mom's head was bowed. My dad's hands were folded. They didn't look at me. They didn't react. I yelled their names. Nothing.
Ushers started closing in from both sides of the aisle. Not fast, never fast. Always walking, always calm. I ducked between rows, knocking over chairs as I went. People didn't move out of the way. They didn't grab me either. They just stood there, letting me squeeze past, brushing against me. Every person I touched felt cold. Not just cool, cold, like they had been standing outside in winter for hours. I reached the side exit near the front, locked. Another exit near the stage, locked. I ran up onto the stage, my breath coming in short, painful gasps. From there, I could see the entire church. Every candle was raised now. The pastor stepped closer. This service isn't for everyone. Some people feel called, others resist. I spotted something behind him, a door. It was slightly open. I didn't think, I just ran. The room behind the stage was narrow and dark, filled with storage shelves and old hymnals. I slammed the door behind me and locked it. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then, the knocking started. Not banging, knocking, slow, polite. "Open the door," the pastor said from the other side. His voice sounded closer now, too close. "There's no need to be afraid." I backed into the corner, shaking so hard I could barely stand. Then I noticed something on the wall, a bulletin board, covered with photos. I stepped closer and felt my stomach drop. They were pictures of people, some smiling, some looking confused, some crying. Each photo had a name and a date written underneath. I scanned them frantically. The dates spanned decades, Christmas Eve, every single one. I found my name at the bottom, with tonight's date. The knocking stopped. The handle turned. The door opened. I don't remember exactly how I got out. I just remember running through hallways that didn't match the layout of the church I knew. Doors that led to staircases going down, then up again. Corridors that smelled of dust and old wood. Eventually, I burst through a door and fell face first into snow. I was outside. The parking lot was empty. No cars, no lights. The church behind me was dark, silent. I ran until my lungs burned. I woke up the next morning in a hospital. A truck driver had found me wandering along the highway, barefoot, bleeding, and half frozen. My parents never came looking for me. According to the police, they had never been at the church that night. In fact, there was no record of an 11 p.m. Christmas Eve service ever being scheduled. The church denied everything. They said I must have had some kind of breakdown. But every year on Christmas Eve, at exactly 11 p.m., I receive a bulletin in the mail. No return address, just one line printed on the front. "Thank you for attending."
My name is Lucas, and this happened on Christmas night when I was 17 years old. I've never told this story publicly before, mostly because it still doesn't feel real when I say it out loud. Even now, years later, there are details I wish I didn't remember so clearly. That Christmas had been normal, quiet, almost boring. My parents, my younger sister, and I spent the day doing the usual things: opening gifts in the morning, eating too much food, watching Christmas movies we'd all seen 100 times before. By the time night came, everyone was exhausted. We lived in a 2-story house at the edge of a suburban neighborhood. Behind our house was a long stretch of undeveloped land, just trees, a drainage ditch, and an old walking trail no one really used anymore. By 11 p.m., my sister was asleep on the couch. My parents were half asleep watching TV, and I was in my room scrolling on my phone. Around midnight, my dad told me to lock up before going to bed. I checked the front door, locked. Back door, locked. Garage door, locked. Windows, all closed. Everything was normal. I went upstairs and got into bed, leaving my door slightly open like I always did. I remember thinking how quiet the house felt.
Christmas was over, and it already felt like a different season. I fell asleep quickly. Sometime later, I woke up to whispering. At first, I thought I was dreaming. My eyes were still closed, and I could hear two voices downstairs, low and hushed. My brain tried to convince me it was the TV still playing. But then I heard my mom's voice. She sounded annoyed. "I told you I locked it." My dad replied, quieter. "Well, something's wrong. I heard it open." I opened my eyes. The house lights were off. The hallway outside my room was dark. I checked the time on my phone. 2:34 a.m. I lay there listening. I heard slow footsteps downstairs. Not just one person, more than one. I assumed my parents were still awake and walking around, maybe checking something. I didn't want to get involved, so I stayed in bed. Then I heard the sound that made my stomach drop. The back door closing. Not slamming, closing gently, like someone was trying not to be heard. I sat up. My parents' bedroom door was closed. Their light was off. I texted my dad. "You guys still up?" No response. The footsteps came again. This time they were on the stairs, slow, measured, each step spaced out like whoever was climbing them didn't want the stairs to creak. I slid out of bed and quietly walked to my door, peeking into the hallway. At the top of the stairs, I saw a shape moving upward. It wasn't my dad. It was taller, thinner, and it stopped halfway up, like it knew I was watching. I ducked back into my room and locked my door. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone. That's when I heard my sister scream. The scream cut through the house so suddenly that my body reacted before my brain did. It was my sister, high-pitched, panicked, real. I yanked my bedroom door open and rushed into the hallway just as my parents' bedroom door flew open across from mine. My dad stepped out first, barefoot, confusion written all over his face. "What's going on?" he shouted. Another sound followed the scream, a heavy thud from downstairs. My mom ran past me toward the stairs. I followed without thinking. Halfway down, I realized something was wrong. The front door was open. Cold air rushed into the house, carrying the smell of snow and wet dirt. My sister was at the bottom of the stairs, standing frozen in her pajamas, staring toward the living room. She was pointing, but her hand was shaking so badly it barely stayed raised. "There was someone," she sobbed. "He was in my room." My dad turned toward the living room, and that's when we saw him. A man stood near the Christmas tree. He wasn't wearing a coat. He wasn't holding anything. He was just standing there, staring at the lights on the tree, like he was studying them. For a second, no one moved. Then my dad shouted at him to get out. The man turned his head slowly. He looked at all of us and smiled. He ran, not toward the door, toward the hallway, toward the bedrooms. My dad chased after him. I followed, adrenaline drowning out fear. We heard the door slam. The guest room. My dad threw his shoulder into it, locked. He yelled at me to call 911. I pulled my phone out, hands slippery with sweat, and dialed. From inside the room, we heard breathing, heavy, uneven. Then something else, scraping, like furniture being moved. My dad backed up and kicked the door. It cracked. Before he could kick again, the door burst open. The man charged straight at us. I don't remember much after that in a clear order. I remember my dad tackling him. I remember the sound of bodies hitting the wall. I remember my mom screaming, and I remember my sister crying behind me. The man was strong, way stronger than he looked. He fought like someone who didn't care if he got hurt. The police arrived minutes later, but it felt like hours. They arrested him in the hallway. He didn't resist them. He didn't say anything. He just kept smiling. Later, we learned the truth. He'd been inside our house before we went to bed. He'd slipped in through the garage while we were busy earlier that night. He hid in the guest room, waiting for us to fall asleep, waiting for Christmas night to go quiet. The reason my parents thought they heard something open earlier? He'd been testing the doors, making sure he had a way out. The worst part came later. The police told us he'd been watching our house for weeks. He knew our routines. He knew when lights went off. He knew which room belonged to my sister, and he knew we thought everyone was asleep. We moved shortly after that. My sister still sleeps with a light on. I still lock my bedroom door every night, and every Christmas, right before I go to bed, I check the guest room, because that door was locked from the inside.
My name is Tyler, and this happened on Christmas Eve while my family and I were driving home. I still don't take road trips at night, especially not in winter. That year, my parents decided to drive instead of fly. We were coming back from my grandparents' house after an early Christmas dinner. It was supposed to be a simple 2-hour drive, mostly on highways and long, empty roads. Snow had started falling lightly as we left, but nothing serious, just enough to blur the edges of the road and reflect the glow of headlights. It was around 10:40 p.m. when we merged onto a stretch of highway that barely had any traffic. I was sitting in the back seat, half asleep, scrolling through my phone. That's when my mom said something. "Has that car been behind us for a while?" I looked up. A dark-colored sedan was driving directly behind us, close enough that its headlights filled the rear window. My dad glanced in the mirror. "Probably just going the same way," he said. At first, I agreed. Highways funnel people together all the time. But after 10 minutes, the car was still there. Same distance, same lane. When my dad changed lanes, the car changed too. When he slowed down, the car slowed down. My stomach tightened. My mom tried to joke about it, but I could hear the tension in her voice. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. The fourth time I opened it, there was a text message. "Your left tail light is out." I told my parents. My dad frowned. "That's weird," he said. "How would they know your number?" Another text came through. "We've been trying to signal you." I looked back. The car behind us flashed its high beams once, then twice. My dad slowed down. "Maybe we should pull over," my mom said quietly. "No," my dad replied. "Not here." The phone buzzed again. "Please, you don't want to keep driving." My heart started racing. I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "The people who know what's in your trunk." My dad hit the brakes. My dad didn't pull over. Instead, he floored it. The speedometer climbed past 70, then 80. The road was slick, and my mom grabbed the door handle, telling him to slow down. But the car behind us matched our speed effortlessly. My phone buzzed again. "You're making this worse." My dad shouted at me to turn my phone off. I didn't. Another message appeared. "If you don't stop, they're going to find him." My mom went completely silent. I looked at her. Her face had drained of color. "Mom," I said, "what are they talking about?" She didn't answer. My dad's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I felt something click into place in my head, something I didn't want to understand yet. We passed an exit with a closed gas station, its sign dark and snow-covered. No lights, no people. The car behind us flashed its high beams again. My phone rang. Unknown number. Against my dad's yelling, I answered. A man's voice came through, calm and controlled. "You need to pull over," he said. "Now." I asked, "Who are you?" He replied, "We're trying to help you, but you're running out of time." I heard another voice in the background, a woman. She sounded panicked. "He's bleeding," she said. My chest tightened. "Who's bleeding?" I asked. There was a pause. Then the man said, "The boy in your trunk." The phone slipped from my hand. My mom started crying. My dad slammed the brakes. The skid skidded onto the shoulder, snow spraying everywhere. The sedan behind us pulled in at an angle, blocking the lane. 2 people got out.
A man and a woman, both wearing heavy coats. They moved quickly but carefully, like they'd done this before. My dad got out, yelling them to stay back. "Open the trunk," the man said. My dad shook his head. "No," he whispered. "Please." The woman pushed past him and opened it anyway. Inside was my cousin Ryan, 16 years old, bleeding, barely conscious. I didn't scream. I couldn't. Everything made sense at once. Earlier that evening, my parents had argued quietly with my uncle. I hadn't known why. Ryan had been upset, stormed out of the house, and disappeared. I assumed he stayed behind. I didn't know my parents found him later. I didn't know he was hurt. I didn't know they panicked. The couple behind us weren't following us. They were following him. They were off-duty EMTs driving home when they saw my parents loading an injured kid into the trunk. They followed us for miles, trying to get us to stop without causing a scene. They had called for help already. The sirens came shortly after. Ryan survived. My parents were arrested. They said they were trying to get him to a hospital without involving police, that they were scared, that they didn't think. I don't go home for Christmas anymore. And every time I get a message from an unknown number, I remember how close we came to letting someone die behind us.